with your new friend Ty.
Welcome back to the Tea Party Podcast. It's the podcast where you find new friends and new music. This week I am joined by a Kennett, Missouri native who released his first single, Memphis, in 2002 and was nominated for a Grammy in 2011 for his performance of Turning Home. And he just released a brand new EP last week. I'm talking about the one and only David Nail, and we will get into that interview in just a moment. But first off, I have to give a huge shout out to our friend Jesse Quant for that beautiful new intro music. Very excited for where we're going moving forward with this podcast. A great guest for episode 50. And a huge shout out to Jamie Gwynn, also a good friend of the podcast, who did the voiceover work for us today. We're very excited to share with you everything that we have going on moving forward. But before we get too far into it, I just want to let everybody know that we have teamed up with Audible again. And as a thank you to everybody that supports the show, this month you can get an absolutely free audiobook and membership to audible.com, access to things like podcasts, wellness lessons, Audible originals, which are fantastic. If you're interested in that, it's absolutely free. Head over to audibletrial.com/Tea Party. That's audibletrial.com/TEEPARTY.
It's time to tee off with Ty and today's guest. Here comes the first four.
Okay, here for question one. David Nail, where are you from?
I'm from Kennett, Missouri.
And dang proud of it. I know that.
Super proud.
Okay, how about this? How'd you start playing music, or when did you start playing music?
Well, my father's a band director, so I always kind of feel like that I sang and like just kind of messed around with him. And he was a band director, so it was obviously there's a lot of instruments around, so I was always kind of messing around there. But first, I started kind of seriously considering like learning an instrument and like learning how to sing and stuff in the 6th grade.
Nice. What's your favorite song of all time?
La Cienega Just Smile by Ryan Adams.
Oh, good pick. Okay, how about this one? What's your favorite song to play live?
I'd say that my favorite song to play live is, depending on how my voice feels, probably Turning Home. It's a dandy to kind of get through. Physically, it takes a lot out of me. All the stars kind of have to be aligned. But if it's one of those shows where you just kind of feel like you can kind of do whatever you want vocally, and you can pull that off, it's usually a pretty strong adrenaline rush.
That's all. I feel like those are always the best songs to play live, the ones that people will sing back to you, and then the ones that are fun physically and kind of challenge your range and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that, a lot of my songs, for whatever reason, are, you would listen to them and you would think, oh, well, that's not necessarily that high, but maybe it sits at a certain part of the register for a consistent amount of time, and so it's taxing that way. Or maybe the phrasing doesn't allow for a lot of breath, and so there's definitely songs that I've had to lower a half step over the years, just because depending on where they were in the set, it could, you could kind of put yourself in danger of losing your voice maybe for the remainder of the show. And so that's one of the frustrating things, I think, as time goes on. You probably don't sing obviously as well as you did when you were 25 or 35, and so you kind of have to start thinking about the set for different reasons than maybe you ever did before, and that can be a challenge, and it can kind of take a little bit of the fun out of it, just to be able to just sit down and kind of list out the songs however your heart desires. You kind of have to look at it a little bit more strategically, but I think that probably comes with age and just probably haven't protected and taken care of my voice as well as probably should have, and probably don't do everything day of show that I probably should have, but we can't all be perfect, right?
Right. And I think that's something that, maybe a lot of people out there that aren't, artists or songwriters, they don't really think about when they go to a concert. Why was this set built in this structure? And you're right. Sometimes you got to save that voice for something a little bit later on in the show. But that was the first four. Moving on just a little bit, I kind of want to circle back and talk about when you started playing music. You grew up, your dad was a band director. You were in, around music basically your whole life. But do you remember when you sat down and were really like, I want to start writing songs? Or do you remember the first time that you wrote a song? Was it right around that 6th grade time?
Well, I don't know if I was writing that early. I know that definitely in high school, there were a lot of classes that I spent writing what probably started out as poetry, just structurally trying to learn like how to get to a rhyme, in a certain place and have it make sense still, instead of actually learning whatever the teacher was teaching. I was off kind of trying to figure that out. And I do remember, I can't remember if I was 17 or 18 where I wrote my first legit where like I'm not ashamed to play this in front of somebody. And it was a song called The Man I'll Never Be. And it was about, this guy who stays out all night at night and he's just, gets home late and is, and in essence, his wife's, waiting up on him, waiting on the man he'll never be. And it's so funny to look back on it because, I'm 17, 18 years old. I didn't drink at the time, and I didn't know anything about what the hell I was writing. But I guess I had explored and experimented enough at storytelling and where to put the rhyme and where the phrasing needs to go that I was able to write this first song. And I'd probably written bits and pieces of things that were never good enough in my mind to continue. But it wasn't until high school that I was a really, really involved in athletics, and had always, I feel like, been considered to pursue that until those doors closed. And it was in high school where I really started to like, holy cow, like here's something that I love as equal or if not more than playing sports. And the gratification of performing and just that reaction from the crowd was so much stronger than say getting a hit and hearing, people cheer for you or winning a game. And I don't know if it was just selfishly because it was just me up there and I had control of everything, but it was really in high school when I began to kind of, I think, subconsciously, play around with the idea of, okay, hey, is there any chance in hell that I could potentially do this and do this as a career?
And that's a heck of a song for a 17 or 18-year-old to tackle. I mean, especially having not experienced any of that, just the storytelling behind something like that's pretty impressive. Was it in high school that you decided that music is what you wanted to do? And is that when you started playing your first shows, or was it when you got off to college that you started that?
Well, truth be told, I was kind of always a pansy. I never really had the what to just fully commit. I always kind of wanted to like have like one hand in the water, so to speak, and like feel around a little bit and see like how things would go. And so when I went to college, I actually moved to Nashville, and it was a way to A, go to college, B, play baseball, and C, explore Nashville and just what exactly the music business looked like, or how exactly one would go about, performing. And I think when I got here, I got injured right off the bat. And so the baseball thing was actually kind of a blessing in disguise because I didn't have to pursue that anymore and I could kind of blame it on the injury and I could really put all my efforts and energy into singing. The only problem was I didn't know where the hell you were supposed to go. I mean, I didn't know, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any sort of connections. I sort of just wandered around downtown aimlessly, like, as silly as this sounds, kind of waiting for someone to stop me and go, "Hey, man, you look like you moved here to be a singer. Let's have a meeting." And was just really naive. And then also my grandmother died that fall, and I was homesick already, and that just kind of re-emphasized that. And so I moved home after 6 months and then spent a year and a half at another college before moving back permanently in the fall of '99. And even then, I still didn't have any of those before mentioned like connections or idea of what in the world I was going to do. But I think mentally and maturity wise, I knew I had a better understanding of like what it would take and what I needed to do. And so I really just kind of buried myself into my apartment and wrote a ton of songs and really worked on songwriting and really worked on finding my voice and what it was that it would sound like. And then, like often happens, you hear those crazy stories about just being in the right place at the right time. A couple of friends that I had made over at Belmont ran into this girl and sort of kind of took it upon them to introduce us, and it happened to be Keith Stegall's daughter, Jenny. And it was sort of a God thing, I think, for both of us. She definitely thought that, there was a reason for us meeting, and it was for her to take me to her father. And so that's kind of how that whole thing really began. But again, super unprepared from the standpoint of like, okay, holy crap, did I just really play 2 songs to get a record deal? Like, when, you have all these like emotions of discouragement and how exactly am I supposed to get this ball rolling, and this is never going to happen. I don't know who to go to. I don't know who to sing for if my songs are any good, to like, boom, here it is.
Well, and we talk about it on this podcast a lot. I mean, fate is huge, and it's something that I truly believe in, be it God's work or just the fate of the world, that if you are meant to do something, you will be in the right place at the right time. And it's something as little as that, where you were just playing out in Nashville and just there happened to be the right person in the room. But before that record deal, what was your experience in Nashville like when you compare it to Kennett? I mean, obviously the world's different in terms of culture and community and that sort of thing.
I mean, I've really been here for 20 years, I guess 21 years now, and I really feel like I've seen the ginormous transformation that Nashville has made in those 20 years. Most of it probably in the last 10 to 12, but as a kid growing up, never really going anywhere, St. Louis really was the extent of any big city I'd been to, and I'd only seen really a part of that. And so I really didn't even understand like how exactly big St. Louis was, because I would just go there and see a baseball game downtown and then drive home after the game. And so I was extremely, and when I say this, like, I mean, probably the most naive person in the history of the world to ever like move to a city and think I'm going to be a singer, like just out of this world naive. And so when I came here, I would literally just walk the streets and just like look up at the buildings and like call my parents. That was before cell phones. So I'd go home and call my parents and just be like, man, I walked by Sony Records today. I walked by MCA. I walked by all these publishing companies, or, a couple of cars drove by me slow that had tinted windows. Surely there was somebody famous in there. I don't have a clue who it was, but it just felt like it, just silly things like that. But just completely different, and the one thing that I've always been a little bittersweet about is there was a friend, my best friend in the world came to play baseball at Belmont for 2 years. So he was here, but he was super busy with school and playing baseball. So we hung out a lot, but we really didn't explore or do a lot of crazy stuff together. And really that was before Nashville really took off. And so I always kind of felt like I was getting the shaft, that I didn't really have anybody from back home that could sort of ride along with me, and experience all these different things and see like how crazy and how, just like I said, like so drastically different than Kennedy was. It sounds ridiculous, but I mean, I used to just marvel at the fact that if, thank God I had a credit card, but I could go eat at the Olive Garden 5 days a week if I wanted. Like there was a Red Lobster, like 7 of them in the city, or like 5 malls. Like it was just, I would find myself saying these ridiculous things to my friends because it was just so far and away different than like anything we were ever used to. I mean, we had to drive 2 hours for a mall. We didn't get a super Walmart till my senior year of high school. Like, you had to travel so far to do anything, really to see anything outside of farmland. And so little did I know that this choice of being a singer would allow me the opportunity to not only take me outside of Kent, Missouri, but show me the entire country and different parts of the world, just because I became a singer. It's just very bizarre.
I think that's kind of the way that a lot of people look at it. I mean, I grew up in a town of like 500,000, but then ended up graduating high school in a town of like 15 or 18,000. And going the other way, I always, lamented the fact that I didn't have a Red Lobster or an Olive Garden or something like that. Like now I live like 6 blocks from a Red Lobster, so I could have it whenever I wanted if that's what it came down to. But moving the opposite way to a small town where they didn't have really anything there, it's a total trip. So I can imagine moving from a small town like Kennett to Nashville has got to be this kind of eye-opening experience. And when you got there, do you remember the first time that you were actually able to play a show in Nashville and how much different that was than the other shows you'd played before?
What's funny is I tell people this all the time. They don't believe me, but the first place that I ever played live was a coffee house. I can't remember. The downtown Broadway's changed so much, I can't remember exactly where it was. I know it was on the side where like the stage is. But it was a place called Henry's Coffee House, and they had an open mic night on Monday night. And we would, after baseball practice, I'd run home, shower, put on whatever I thought was my best looking clothes, and I would go down and sign up. And sometimes you'd get there, and it, again, being naive, like, man, I put my name on the list, but like this is taking forever, like it's going to be like, I'm never going to get called. I'm so far down. And I remember like I would leave pretty much every time because either my guys on the team were tired and wanted to go home or tired of sitting there. So I remember finally knowing when I showed up that like I was going to be able to get on. And so we were fired up. And I went up there and I sang at least one of my songs and then like 2 covers. So I did 2 covers at a songwriter's open mic night. So everybody in that crowd was probably like, who's this idiot that thinks he wrote Garth Brooks is much too young to feel this damn ode? But again, like I just didn't grasp the whole I thought it was just, hey, you get up there and show everybody that you can sing really good. And maybe if you have a song you wrote, you sing it. I didn't realize you were supposed to all play original songs. And so I would pay a lot of money if someone somewhere had video of that, because I just remember like this very faint clap after I played these covers, because I mean, I was 18 years old. Everybody in there knew I didn't write those songs.
Yeah. That's a little bit different when, when you're sitting at, a writer's round or something like that, and they bust out a cover of something that they didn't write. I think even the people outside of the industry would be kind of like, yeah, okay, this kid's a little bit green. But you talked about, and just for lack of a better word, getting discovered. What was that experience like when you went through what I think was Mercury and signed the record deal and started working on music with that deal behind you?
Well, I mean, it was, I was so, it was very bizarre. My first deal I wrote for Keith Stegall's company. I was signed by Keith. Keith produced me, and I was managed by one of Keith's really close friends. But like, I was so young. I was 20 years old, and very like everything was very. The circle was extremely small. I knew maybe one or two people from the record label. I wrote with one or two people as far as co-writing, and so I was very kind of sort of hidden. And I really think they were definitely trying to protect me and try to like keep me from maybe making some mistakes. But the reality of the situation is I was so like kind of like protected that I think I alienated a lot of people, and made a lot of people feel like they either I was too cool for school or that they weren't, I guess strong enough business wise or talented enough to be in that circle. And so, but again, I mean, I was 20, 21 years old. Like I didn't know what the hell was going on. Looking back now, it seems pretty obvious, but like back then, I just thought that was the way it was. That was the way it was supposed to be. And that's just the way things worked. And really, to be honest with you, I thought when I got a record deal, I just thought that was the hard part. I never in a million years realized the significance of what was about to come along. I thought, man, if I got this record deal, this was the hard part. The rest is sort of the rest is downhill, so to speak.
Gotcha. And it turned out to be, quite a bit of a journey after after you were able to release your first single ever, really, Memphis. You took some time off, and then we're able to come back to Nashville. And if we have time, I want to talk about that a little bit later. But right now, I want to switch gears and talk about the brand new EP that you released last week. It's called Bootheel 2020. And, you've always been kind of this raw and honest songwriter in your music, but this EP feels a lot deeper than that, especially one of the songs that we have here for everybody to take a listen to. It's called Roach Motel, and it's got a pretty powerful story behind it. You mind sharing that with everybody and telling them how this song came together?
Well, it's a song that there's about 3 or 4 different variables to it. It's one of those songs where I took bits and pieces of some of my personal experiences and stories that I'd heard and people that I'd met, and then there's obviously some fiction in there. But it's a term that I first heard back when I was in high school, and I always just kind of, there was such a strong negative connotation to that word, and just it just gave you this feeling inside, kind of gave you the creepies, and there were places like that in Kennett where people would refer to as, well, that's just a little Roach Motel, that's what happens in a place like that, and of course I'd nod my head like, yeah, sure. And I had no clue, why would a 15, 16-year-old kid know what the hell they were talking about? But I sort of always kept that term in the back of my head, and different points in my life I'd try to write it, but it was such a general term. I really didn't realize that I really had the freedom to kind of write it however I wanted and write about whatever I wanted and kind of take it wherever I wanted. It didn't necessarily have to specifically be about the specific place like in my hometown or whatever. But I kind of always envisioned that place in the back of my mind and everything kind of happening there. And so, it's funny because when I initially wrote it, the message that you hear and the lyric that you hear is pretty well what I intended to say and what I intended to mean. And as I lived with the song and began to kind of listen to the song as a fan of the song and not the person who wrote it or singing it, which obviously takes a lot of time to kind of get comfortable enough with that to do that. But I just began to fall in love with this female in the story, and not like actual literal love, but I just had this, I developed this admiration and this respect for this young lady who, despite all of these, stereotypical mistakes or, these wrong roads that she had traveled down, or, bad decisions, or, morally wrong decisions, whatever it is that somebody wants to, assume by the lyric, she was still standing, and in her own weird little way, she felt like she turned the tables, and instead of it being her that was being used and her that was being abused, she found this weird satisfaction in kind of now being the person in control, and now being the person who was, impacting this other person in, good or bad way, depending on, I think it's the glorious thing about the song is you kind of only have to assume like what this kid or young man is like thinking and experiencing, and because she kind of dominates the story, she definitely dominates the story. And so, without going into super like details, I went to a charity event here in town with my wife, and it was something she got invited to, and really didn't know exactly what in the world I was going to witness. But it ended up being about this young lady who, had been tragically, sexually abused as a kid, and that just kind of began the spiraling out of control, and then it became like this sort of, life was just, hey, can I survive today? How do I survive today? How do I, make money? How to put food in my mouth? How do I pay rent? And just like, it was just whatever she had to do. And a lot of times that involved, I guess, prostitution in a way. And a lot of times she would have relationships with these people, where, she's in essence dating this person, but yet still going out on the side and like sleeping with other people to make money. And it was just, as a story got told, the classic case of all those stereotypical, emotions that you feel, and just like, holy cow, man, this is just like the worst story you've ever heard. And then she ends up full blown, she doesn't even realize she has HIV to the point until she has AIDS. And somebody picks her up off the street, takes her in, more or less adopts her. But just hearing her tell her story, by the end of it, every person in that room, and I assure you this is true because we all talked about it, every person in that room really, like, if that guy hadn't adopted her, we would have. Because while it's easy to sit there and say, well, she made these choices and she chose to do this, and there was this tremendous amount of respect for the fact that despite all of these issues, she managed to survive, and now is sort of like, as much as one can be living with AIDS and knowing that, without a cure that eventually she will, fall victim to that. But there was just this amazing amount of respect for her. And so that was, after hearing that, I really feel like subconsciously I was able to go to the song, and while I wasn't able to create this like super love happy ending, in the song, I really feel like that story kind of served as the overall basis for this character of just this snapshot into her life when she was kind of trying to figure out maybe how it is that she is to get out of this, I don't say line of work, because I feel like it's a lot deeper than that, but figure out how she is eventually gonna to get on her own 2 feet and leave behind this sort of train wreck that she by no means initiated. It was sort of kind of she was sort of kind of thrown into it, obviously without really it being her choice. And so it's funny because I'm extremely passionate about this person who in reality is a fictitious person. I mean, there's bits and pieces I wrote about different things, but I just feel like that, and I've kind of gone through this sort of not really transformation. I feel like I've always respected women and always had a deep appreciation for women. I'm a huge mama's boy. I have 2 daughters now. I've watched my wife just give birth to our latest daughter, and it just, I don't know if it's the fact that I have so many women in my life, and so now I have this like ridiculously like strong sympathy for women and like admiration for women, but it definitely changed how I listened to this song, and it definitely changed how I perceived the maybe initial inspiration of starting to write the song. And I'm super proud of it. I'm super proud of just of the girl of the song, and I feel like that while you sort of have to kind of make your own conclusion of how you feel like she ends up or where the boy ends up, and that's the glorious thing about music is everybody can kind of create their own story. But I think for me, when I listen to it, I picture her on the doorstep of kind of figuring everything out. And this is just kind of one of the last maybe ugly steps that she has to take before she can truly get back on her feet.
Well, and it's such a powerful story behind this song that feels powerful just in listening to it. I mean, I've probably listened to your EP 10 times this weekend, one to get ready for this interview, but also because it's a good EP to listen to. And I wish I would have known this story the first time that I heard the song, because I feel like here when we listen to it in a second, it's going to change my perspective a little bit. But let's give everybody a chance here to listen to it right now. This one is off of his brand new EP, Bootheel 2020. It's called Roach Motel by David Nail.
She said, don't say a word, just keep it to yourself. Nobody's gonna know. I ain't that easily impressed. I borrowed a truck, I'll park it around back. Got $100 bill, nothing they can track. It's a Roach Motel. We don't need a lot of time. Just lie on your back and enjoy the ride. I was 13, barely out of 7th grade. And that summer every boy kept coming round my way. I've been in your shoes. Don't you worry about a thing. Ain't nothing you can do that I ain't ever felt or seen. It's a Roach Motel. We don't need a lot of time. Just lie on your back and enjoy the ride. 'Cause now I find comfort in being in control. And always knowing I'm a memory. You ain't the first, and you won't be the last to be with me. So boy, please be with me. It's a Roach Motel. We don't need a lot of time. Just lie on your back and enjoy the ride.
And that one was Roach Motel by David Nail. It's off of his brand new EP called Bootheel 2020. You can find it out everywhere right now. And David, it's been about 4 years since you put out your last album. Last year you released an EP called Oh Mother. What was it that's pushing you to kind of release these, I guess, shorter tastes of music in an EP variety instead of an album?
Well, as somebody who has medically diagnosed ADD, I feel like it really suits my personality, and it really, I think that the one thing that I disliked the most about being on a major label and making records is, when it came time to make a record, you'd record a few songs and then you'd release the song, and then sort of based on the success of that song, it would determine whether or not you would go back in and record some more stuff. And oftentimes it may be 5, 6, 7 months since you recorded the first stuff. And so mentally and musically, you would just be in a different place. And I feel like it always was very difficult for me to feel like I made this a fluid piece of music that all sort of kind of came from the same place. And then by the time you release the record, you were already kind of like thinking about something else, and the label was already tired of your record because they lived with it for a year. And so it just sort of kind of wasn't successful for anybody really, as far as to, the passion, there's somebody else turning in something new when yours was coming out that they're all excited about. It's just human nature to kind of be less passionate about something that you've lived with for so long. I mean, I do that all the time as a songwriter with songs, and so this was and it's a big reason why I released it when I did is because I knew that if I didn't release it now and I didn't put it out there as is, it was going to probably most likely never come out, or if it did, it would change drastically sonically and maybe even lyrically, I don't know. And I just didn't want that to happen. And I felt like 2020 being the year that it is, it was very important for it to just kind of happen the way it happened. and everything beyond just making the decision to release it when I did, it became very. It was just a 2020 thing, you know. I mean, that's really the only way I can explain it. Is it's just everything seems so bizarre and raw and real and sad and kind of gloomy, and this music definitely, I think, felt that way. But I was super passionate about it, and I wanted it to come out. And as far as the EP thing, like it allows me the opportunity of when I'm working on something, the timing aspect of it is so much more beneficial to me. And I always feel like that it allows you to move on a little quicker. Like, I mean, ironically, this morning as I was driving into run some errands, I was super vibing out to some stuff on the radio, and out of nowhere just kind of turned it down and started just kind of brainstorming ideas. And I just had an EP come out 3 days ago, and I've already kind of moved on. Like, I'm already, concerned about what's next and what's that going to sound like, what's it going to feel like, what's it going to, what's the instrumentation, what's the time, what is my timeline? Have I already written the songs? Is it something I haven't written? And so kind of doing it this way allows that framework to happen a lot freer.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think you said a whole book there when you said it's a 2020 thing, because that's really just, I think, kind of become the mantra of this year. But one really cool part of the EP is that you included your son Lawson in the intro and in the interlude. And honestly, I'll be honest here. Listening to the interlude kind of brought a few happy tears to my eyes. I've got a 7-year-old son whose favorite thing to do is to jump into the studio with me, put the headphones on, and just yell into the microphone for 15 minutes so that he can hear himself. But he also goes out and visits my wife's family in their small little hometown a couple of times a year. And his favorite part of visiting is always his pop and grandma. So when I heard that, it was a really nice emotional connection. But I've got a couple of questions for you behind that. What was the idea of including him? Like, where did that come from? And then how special was it for you to share a moment like that?
Well, it was the very last thing that we did, and it was really already mastered. And all of my girls were out of town, and it was just me and him for a week, for about a day and a half. And my son's a lot like me. We're just personality-wise, he's very sensitive. He's a big mama's boy. He's a thinker. He's shy. And so it's really difficult to talk to him from the standpoint of, like, I'm trying to, like, imagine. I'm like playing shrink, like I'm like, okay, he's saying this, but what's he really feeling, or what's he really wanting to say, or what's he dancing around? Because I definitely did that as a kid, and probably even now. He just started asking me about discipline, and like, hey, is this when you were a kid, you did this? Did Papa and Grammy do this to you? Did they say this to you? Did they tell you to do this? And I just started kind of talking about growing up. And I mean, the EP, I'm not even thinking about music or anything. And I just pulled out my phone, and he definitely knew. I think he probably thought I was taking pictures. But I just started asking him questions, and I said, you know where Daddy's from? Where's Daddy from? And he goes, Kennett. And I said, you know what state Kennett's in? He said, Missouri. And I said, I want you to say my daddy's from Kennett. And so suddenly it was like the deer in the headlights. Like, he kind of knew, like, uh-oh, now I've got to do it, like, for real. And that's why he sounds so sort of unsure of himself, but like very pure and innocent. And I think much like I probably was when I was 5 years old, very sort of hesitant and shy and not really confident in how I was doing something, or if somebody asks me to do it again, okay, why are they asking me to do this again? Is it, they gonna laugh at me, or is it good? And then, and so they were all pretty much, I mean, it was all like probably 4 or 5, just like one take sentences. And, there were 2 or 3 of them, 2 of which are on the EP, where it just screamed, this is how this should be introduced. And I loved when he said, "This is Bootheel." I mean, I was just like, "Holy cow, man!" Like, how is anybody? And then to go into Roach Motel was just like such a powerful moment. So I text Reed, the guy who engineered it and helped me out with the project, and I just said, "Hey, man, I don't know how in the hell you can do this, or if it's even like digitally or whatever possible, but we got to figure out a way, even if it sounds like crap, to incorporate this somehow, because I just feel like it really helps the story get told."
And it really does. I mean, I think just those 2 kind of step downs in the EP really help kind of bring a full picture to the project overall. And we've got another song here off the album. It's the one that comes right after the interlude. It's called Back Home. And I think most of us can kind of, especially after talking to you here for a little bit, kind of piece together where this story came from. But give us like just a quick overview of what the writing process was like for this song.
Well, I don't ever, with the exception of, I shouldn't say never, because I obviously did with Roach Motel, I had the title. But I don't ever, I shouldn't say I don't ever, but I don't prefer to have a title prior to sitting down to write, because I feel like it just automatically limits you, and sort of force it. You're just constantly figuring, the whole time you're writing the song, you're constantly trying to figure out how you're going to get to this specific title, instead of just what's the best line for the next line. And so I didn't know it was going to be Back Home. I just kind of, was playing guitar and kind of had this feel going. And I just said, another gravel road, bound back in the field, nobody will ever know, kind of thing. And I really didn't think, I just kind of humming that Back Home thing while I was writing it, never really assuming that I was just going to settle on that as like some sort of chorus. I would just really love the whole vibe of the verses. And I had probably about 3 or 4 versions of what became like the second verse. I was just 17, and it was all about kind of figuring out what did I want this to say. And I had a conversation with my wife about, I had an uncle pass away last year, and he spent very little of his life in Kennett, but he wanted to be buried to my grandmother. And that had such a powerful impact on me. Just, he was definitely the type of person who was not, I don't want to say he wouldn't care, but it was just, he would definitely tell his wife, like, "Look, man, you can get buried where you want. I'm getting buried in Kent. Like, this is the way it's going to happen." But I just, when my mom said he wanted to be married by Mamaw, I remember, I think I kept it together in person, but just inside it just ripped me apart. And so I remember talking to Catherine, and I said, I'm on the fence about a lot of things when it comes to, when my time comes. I said, but I really feel like that I want to be, I want my funeral, I want all that to be in Kennett, because I just feel like that's where I'm from, and that's just it's where I was born. It's just where I belong. And I remember saying that, knowing that I had written, that song and that those exact lines were in the chorus. And so that's when I really started to kind of toy with some of the verses. And I really wanted it to feel like, hey, like maybe this guy is being buried. Maybe this guy is in a casket and he's just trying to get this message across to all these people that, hey, at the end of the day, we all come back home. We all kind of end up where it all began. And it was such a powerful moment because I know I had danced around that for a lot of years, and it was kind of the first time that I was able to say, and obviously the whole world can hear it now, but there's a lot of people I grew up with that thought, oh man, I can't wait to get the hell out of Kent, man, this place is just holding me back. And I always felt like, here I am, I kind of have this occupation where I'm sort of forced to live where I live. And I said, but how could you have all this animosity for this place that kind of made you the person that you are? And it just always kind of broke my heart to hear people talk about that. And this is kind of my way of saying, hey, look, man, you can go wherever you want. You can do whatever you do. You can marry whoever you're going to marry and raise your family however you're going to do. But at the end of the day, you're from freaking Kent, Missouri. And there ain't nothing you can do to get that out of you. It's in the fabric of who you are. And you should honor that and be proud of it. And be proud of the people that helped you become the person you are today. And that's pretty much what the song's about.
Well, here, let's let everybody take a listen to it with that kind of energy. It's called Back Home, brand new music from David Nail.
Another summer night, another gravel road, way on back in the fields where no one will ever know. In the back of my truck, just fumbling around, didn't know what to do, but damn sure gonna find out. Back home, back home. I was born where I belong, back home. I was just 17, couldn't wait to get out. Had much bigger dreams, bigger than this old town. But the fame wouldn't give me that feeling inside. I had it from the beginning, I had it here all of my life. Back home, back home. I was born where I belong, back home. You can run from the country, you can run from your past. You can try to be different, but you're sure gonna come back. 'Cause it's deep in the water, it's deep in your soul. You can go anywhere, but down here everybody knows back home. Home. back home.
And that one off of his brand new EP that just dropped last week, Bootheel 2020. It's Back Home by David Nail. And David, man, thank you so much for jumping on here. What do you have planned for 2021? Anything for people to keep an eye out for? New music, maybe? Sounds like you were already started working on the next project in the car.
I'm gonna really try to do a lot of stuff. This I feel like 2020 really robbed me of a lot of creativity and a lot of ideas and stuff. And so I'm, like a lot of people, probably very anxious for 2021 and to kind of put the year behind us and kind of move on and hopefully stay healthy and capable of putting out as much new music as hopefully people want to hear, and this is what I do for a living, and this is the only thing I've ever wanted to do, and so I'm going to keep doing it until the people tell me to get a regular job.
That is a solid plan. David, man, thank you so much for jumping on here. It's been an absolute blast.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And that was another episode of the Tea Party Podcast, the country music podcast where you find new friends and new music like David Nail and his new EP, Bootheel 2020.
Go tee off on the like button at facebook.com/Tea Party Podcast. This has been a Tea Party Communications production.